Hello, my name is Starla Gibson, and I'm going to be going over some test data with you on a fourth grade student of mine. For this assignment, we're going to call her Ellie. So I'm going to be explaining the results and the type of test that she took, and she has taken intellectual or cognitive exams. Those are also more commonly known as IQ exams. She has taken achievement tests. Social, emotional, and behavioral screenings have been done on her. Speech screenings or exams, adaptive behavior screenings, as well as just basic observations for behavior and things like that. So, starting with IQ or intelligence, she took the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children. And this test has 6 main domains. One of the components was verbal comprehension. Verbal comprehension refers to the child's degree of word knowledge as well as their ability to compare and contrast information. The next component to the test is the visual spatial portion. This test uses visual puzzles, and it basically just tests her memory. The next component was the fluid reasoning domain, and that basically just tests her ability to use inductive and deductive logic. And if you don't know what that means, inductive logic means that the student is able to start with a conclusion and that they're able to figure out why that conclusion happens through making inferences. And then deductive logic means that the student is able to start with a component of the story and make their own conclusion using inferences. The next component is the working memory domain. This component just basically focuses on her short-term memory. The processing speed domain examines her ability to pay attention to details, and that was the last domain or component to the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children. Now, with all those put together, there's a full scale domain that just puts everything together and gives them an entire score for the whole exam. So looking at Ellie's scores specifically, she scored extremely low in verbal comprehension and speed processing. She scored very low in the visual, spatial, and the working memory domains. So not as low as the verbal comprehension and speed processing, but still very low. She scored in the low average for the fluid reasoning domains. So overall, on this entire exam as a whole, Ellie scored very low compared to peers her same age. So with all that information being given, Ellie has been given the diagnosis of having an intellectual disability. And considering this Wechsler Intelligence Scale has shown her to be delayed in every single area they have listed for intelligence, that is a highly likely possibility as to why she was labeled as having an intellectual disability. For intelligence, she was also given the Kaufman test, for achievement. Ellie was also given the Kaufman test of educational achievement. So achievement tests they're similar to the intelligence test, but they focus more on academics. So this test examined her ability for letter word recognition and reading comprehension. And then it'll combine those two and give you an entire reading score. It also tests her basic mathematics, math concepts, and applications, as well as math computations. So that's basically, can she add, can she subtract? And it's can she apply these problems to real world situations? It just kind of looks at all aspects of how math is used, whether it be on paper or in daily living. There is a written language portion of the exam, a spelling portion, and a written expression portion. The written expression is her ability to create well-written pieces that are able to be fluently read by the reader. But the written language is her ability to take her own words and just words that she is familiar with and be able to use them in her writing. So the written language is something she knows about. She's writing about something of interest to her. So with this test, Ellie has shown to have a deficit in all areas of this Kaufman test of educational achievement. So 85 and below is considered to be a deficit, which means she struggles. Well, she scored below 85 in all areas of this test. She scored a 71 in mathematics, 72 in math concepts and applications, and a 73 for math computations. So math is technically considered to be her strength because she scored the highest in math, but it's still on average roughly 10 to 15 points or so below where she needs to be. So she still has a deficit in mathematics, even though it's considered to be a strength for her. So despite her math scores, if you go and look at the reading portion of this achievement test, she scored a 63, so that's drastically even lower than her math on her reading comprehension, indicating that there is a high deficit there because she needs to be at 85 and she's scoring 63. She scored a 58 in letter and word recognition. That just basically means that she is having difficulty recognizing words as she sees them on paper. So her total reading score with those two areas combined is a 58. And that's very, very low in reading. So she's really, really struggling in that area. And then when you look at her written language, we are much, much lower. We're down to a 41. Her spelling's a 47. And then her written expression is a 40. And it's very, very likely that her deficits in written expression, written language and stuff, they tie into her deficits with reading. Because if she's unable to read and recognize things, then she is much less likely to be able to write it down and express herself through writing. So overall, she's very much so struggling. She has a deficit in all areas of achievement with this Kaufman test, and that's another great indicator as to why she is probably diagnosed as having an intellectual disability. She has also taken as an achievement test, she was given two different ones, the Kaufman, and then she was also given the Peabody individual achievement test. And this test just basically examines her ability to process general information, focusing on reading recognition, reading comprehension, mathematics, and spelling as well. For Ellie to be considered on track, she should have had a score of at least 1.3 in every area on this Peabody test. Now, this was given on the 3rd month of her 1st grade year, which is why she would have had a 1.3 to be on track, because it was year 1, the 3rd month. So she scored slightly below average in general information, so she scored a 1.1. In mathematics, a 1.0. Then she scored a little bit lower when you look at her reading recognition. She was down to a K9 level, which would be like a kindergarten year, 9th month level. And then her reading level for comprehension was also a K9. This caused her entire reading score to average out at the kindergarten 9-month level. Then she scored a little bit lower in spelling. She scored a K8. So overall, for this entire test, all components combined, Ellie scored on a K9 level, indicating that she's likely, I would say, roughly 5 months behind her peers at this time that this exam was given. If we move on just a little bit farther, there's another achievement test she was given, and it's called the Wechsler Individual Achievement Test. I'm so sorry. So this particular achievement test was broken into several components. One section was her receptive vocabulary, which determines her ability to listen to details. She tested on expressive vocabulary, which measures her ability to speak using vocabulary and use her word retrieval skills. She was tested on oral discourse, which measures her listening comprehension skills. She was tested on her reading skills, which measures things just like letter reading and phonological awareness. She was scored on alphabet writing fluency, which measures her ability just to be able to quickly write letters down. She was scored on math problem solving and numerical operations. Her oral word fluency, which is like how she retrieves words. And lastly, she was also scored on sentence repetition, which measures her verbal memory and attention. So Ellie scored to have a deficit in all but one area of this achievement test as well. She scored the highest in her oral word fluency, being a 95, and this was definitely on this test considered to be a strength for her. Then she scored a 76 in receptive vocabulary, 74 in expressive vocabulary, 73 in oral discourse comprehension, 72 in numerical operations, and then we kind of dropped down to the 60s to show an even more severe deficit for this achievement test in math problem solving, sentence repetition. Those both scored 67. And then if you go even farther down, for alphabet writing fluency, she scored a 61. And lastly, her reading score showed the most severe deficit at a 59. So when you compare these three achievement tests, we have the Kaufman, the Peabody, and the Wechsler. She's showing to pretty much across the board have a deficit in almost all areas of all tests. So I believe that these are a really good indicator that she's struggling, and the intellectual disability was probably a very much so appropriate diagnosis for her when looking at all of these results and her intelligence results. So if we move forward onto the social, emotional, and behavioral side of it, Ellie was given the Connors 3rd edition. This exam just primarily tests children with ADHD. It looks for conduct disorder and oppositional defiance disorder. The exam was like a rating scale where various questions were asked about her, like how does she react when certain things happen, or does she have anxiety, does she exhibit certain behaviors and stuff like that. This exam was completed by the mother, and she noted Ellie to have difficulties just in the home setting for things like learning problems, and then defiance and aggression, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. However, even those, she showed to show some characteristics of those things, nothing on any of it showed to be severe enough to like give her any kind of diagnosis of having a defiance disorder, ADHD, or conduct or anything. So she showed slight signs, but not enough to make a difference in her diagnosis. Ellie was also scored on the behavior assessment scale for children, and this is much like the Connors 3rd edition. It was also done by her mother, but nothing on this exam either showed her to have a deficit in any kind of behavioral component. The most notable thing about the results for this behavior assessment was that her mother indicated that she was experiencing difficulty and just being a little bit withdrawn from her peers. She did note that she had anxiety just about daily activities and things, but again, all things were noted to fall in the normal range, nothing out of the ordinary or that should be, there's not a concern anywhere with those. If we move on to speech and language, so she was given a clinical evaluation of language fundamentals exam. This exam focused on sentence comprehension, which measures her ability to interpret spoken sentences. Ellie scored a 5 on that, meaning that she is moderately delayed in that area. It measures her linguistic concepts, which is her ability to be able to interpret spoken direction that contains basic concepts that require logical operations. She scored a 4 on that, which means that she is, again, moderately delayed in this area. It measured word structure, which is her ability to apply word structure rules to make inflections, derivations, and comparisons. She scored a 7 on this, which means that she's just mildly delayed in this area as well. She was tested on word classes, and the word classes subtest that was used to evaluate her ability to understand relationship between words that are it's a variety of part, whole, and semantic class relationships. Ellie received a scaled score of 6, which again falls in the mildly delayed range of functioning in this area. The following direction subtest was used to evaluate her ability to interpret, recall, execute oral commands of increasing length and complexity that contain concepts of functional language. Ellie received a scaled score of 7 in this area, which again is mildly delayed. There's the formulating sentences subtest, and it examines her ability to formulate compound and complex sentences when given grammatical constraints. She received a scaled score of 2, which means she is severely delayed in this area. There was a recalling sentences subtest that evaluates her ability to recall and reproduce sentences of varying length and syntactic complexity. She received a scaled score of 5 in this area, which is, again, moderately delayed. There was a core language score, which is considered to be the most representative measure of Ellie's language skills and provides a reliable way to qualify just her overall language performance. Ellie received a core language score of 71, which falls in the 3rd percentile, which basically places Ellie in the moderately delayed area functioning for her speech and language. The receptive language index is a cumulative measure of performance on 3 subtests, which is designed to probe receptive aspects of language, including comprehension and her listening. Ellie received a receptive language index score of 76, which falls in the 5th percentile, and it places her again in the moderately delayed area of functioning. The expressive language index is a cumulative measure of performance on the 3 subtests, and they probe expressive aspects of language, including her oral language expression. She received a score of 70 in this area, which falls in the second percentile and again places her in the moderately delayed range of functioning. Language Content Index is a cumulative measure of performance on the 3 subtests that measure various aspects of semantic development, relationships among words, interpretations of factual and inferential information that's presented orally, and it's her ability to create meaningful, semantically and syntactically correct sentences. For this language content index portion, she received a 76, which is in the 5th percentile, and again places her in the moderately delayed area of functioning for that area. There was the language structure index, which is a cumulative measure of performance on the 3 subtests put together. And for this, she received a score of 71, which is in the 3rd percentile. So overall, with everything put together, again, she falls in the moderately delayed range of functioning. So moving on to adaptive behavior. This adaptive behavior scale, sometimes it's the Adaptive Behavior Assessment System. At our school, we just call it the ABAS. This is normally completed by the teacher and the mother, or the parent or guardian. Ellie's mother completed her, but I was really shocked when I went through her folder and saw that there wasn't one completed by her past teacher. So again, this is kind of similar to the test we looked at for social emotional. It asks you several questions like, can she button her clothes? Does she chew with her mouth closed? Does she know to wash her hands with soap? Can she clean up after herself? There's also things like, does she realize that she may have hurt someone's feelings, or does she end a conversation properly, and things like that. It tests all areas. It asks you questions to determine how they're doing on home living, school living, health and safety, all kinds of things like that. So with all of that put together, the results showed that Ellie was just average in all areas, whether it be communication, functional academics, self-care, health safety, whatever it was. And she actually, through this ABAS form, showed to be above average in areas of community use, leisure, self-direction, and social behaviors. She even scored superior in the area of home living for this particular exam. If we move on through to the observations, Ellie, while she was at Integrated Health, during an intake, her mother, they give you a summary, and the observations are just what they saw her do while they were observing her, basically. It's just a summary of her behavior, of what happened and stuff. So during the intake for this observation, the mother was sitting at the examiner's desk, and Ellie was playing on the floor with her sister. She was noted to be somewhat bossy with her sister, and she was often like directing the play and like telling her sister what to do and things. But throughout the interview, she was interactive and social with both the examiner and her mother. She frequently answered questions directed towards her, and she would go to her mother and the examiner for frequent hugs and things throughout the whole process. Soon after this setting, Ellie was accompanied by the examiner, and they moved over to a testing room. They didn't have any difficulty switching her placement. and rapport was just very quickly established. And they were able to just talk about toys in the office and activities that Ellie prefers. During the testing, she was just very focused on completing every task that they gave her. She was polite and very well mannered. So throughout this observation, she did not wear any glasses. She had no hearing aids. She attempted every single thing they gave her with ease. She had no problems with anything. And she just put forth really good effort during the assessment. And the test results, they just overall seem to be a very good indication of just her current levels of abilities and things, because like she wasn't under any stress and she wasn't nervous or anxious or anything. So it was a pretty good indicator of just her regular daily behavior. Lastly, just for looking at just other exams that can be conducted on students, I chose just to kind of talk about the hearing and vision exam, because that's something that we really press at our school. It's very crucial. It's something we have to have passed both of them before we are able to do any of this other testing that I've talked about. And if it doesn't get passed, you got to get a hold of the doctors, and we got to get them some glasses or get a prescription or get a letter. This one is extremely important. So they tested her hearing and vision, and it's just a typical exam like you would get at an eye doctor. They look at the chart, and then they look, they put their head on the thing that goes in their eyes, and they look at little dots and see, is the dot inside the box or out of the box, and they'll look at E's and see which way the legs on the E's are facing and things like that. And for hearing, it's real simple. They put on headphones and they listen for the beep and just raise their hand if they hear the beep. So Ellie passed her hearing first time, but she failed her vision. So quickly after this, mother was able to get her into the doctor, got her eyes tested, they got her glasses, and now she wears them daily at school, and as long as she has them on, she passes. So overall, across the board, regardless if it's intelligence exams, achievement exams, speech exams, whatever it is, she is showing to have deficits across the board, all areas. Of course, there's maybe one area here and there where she's showing to be a little higher up on certain exams, but altogether, if you look at all of them as a whole and compare them, it's evident that she is struggling in all areas of intellectual functioning and all areas of academic achievement. So with that being said, again, I'm going to say her diagnosis of having an intellectual disability, I believe that that is very valid, because she struggles in all areas. It's not that she doesn't try or that she doesn't give her best effort. She truly struggles in every single area. It's not a severe learning disability. I truly believe that it's an intellectual disability, and I believe that she is properly diagnosed, looking through her folder and examining all her data. Thanks.